Welcome back to Pixel Project Radio, the video game discussions podcast where we do deep dives and analyze all of our favorite games and some of yours too. I am Rick, and this is part 2 of our Xenosaga Episode I mini-series. I'm joined again by Chris from the Retro Hangover podcast and Nick from Friday Night Gamescast. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me again.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me back. Appreciate it, Rick.
And we are going to jump right in talking about Xenosaga Episode I. For this episode, we are going to be playing up to the point where Cherenkov meets KOSMOS as she's sleeping. I don't really want to say more because that's kind of spoilery, but it's after we meet up with some new pals, Tony, Hammer, and Captain Matthews. We stopped last time right as we were about to go into the Realian lab, which is where we're going today. That's where we're going to pick up. Something that I noticed as I was playing through the game and I was sort of rewatching some scenes on YouTube for my notes to find pieces of audio that I wanted to put in here is I think going through this episode, in particular, episode 2 of this miniseries, part 2, we should say, to differentiate it from Xenosaga, is there are just so many unanswered questions and flashbacks and aside scenes that don't make a lot of sense right now, and most of them make sense towards the end of the game. A lot of them still are answered in part 2 or episode 2 and episode 3, and that's just how Xenosaga goes. But if you're listening to this as somebody that's not interested in playing the game, just bear with us. There is payoff. That being said, I think a lot of the stuff we'll talk about today is very interesting.
Yeah, I can agree more. There's so much packed in here for this section that we get into, so I'm excited to jump in there.
Especially this first section. I think this sets up a very interesting sub-theme of the game regarding the Realians. So we're starting off this episode today, this part of the miniseries, by going to the Realian lab with Shion. Is this the first time, do you guys remember, is this the first time in the game we've heard that term?
Yeah, as far as I can recall, yes, when you get introduced to them, because I remember very specifically going up to this part in the Woglinde and being like, oh, what are these people attached to, like stretchers and stuff like that? And that's when I found myself getting introduced to the concept of Realians and so much more about the lore of the world.
It's a really cool part of the lore of this game. So Realians are a sort of artificial human being. The easiest way to think about them is they are somewhere between full human and cyborg, sort of half robot, half human. They're in between somehow. They're made of organic material, and they need to eat for sustenance, but they are machines at the end of the day. It gets into this really fascinating discussion on human rights in a way. That's something that's going to come up here in a moment. But I'm curious, does this sub-theme of this idea of what is humanity and how do we define what it is to be alive, does that work for you too in this game or even as a theme in general? Maybe do you feel it's too played out at this point? What do you think?
I think that it's a really interesting theme to set up in the very beginning, particularly because it's immediately juxtaposed to Shion beginning her relationship with KOSMOS. Yes. And this understanding of like where KOSMOS is supposed to go as a character or why we expect something of her. And I think that it's a smart thing that they did this at the point in time that they did, because it establishes a lot of things that we understand about Shion out of the gate, with realizing that she is on the side of trying to recognize Realians as being more human than they're regarded, by society at that point in time. So I think it works for me.
I definitely think that this brings up a lot of interesting questions. Again, I agree with Nick here when it comes to how, what Shion's perspective is, because you will see it, as he very much said, juxtaposed against how she does treat KOSMOS later on and what her feelings are towards her as opposed to what they are with the Realians in this scene. I'm also looking at that question about human rights, more specifically in kind of like the Philip K. Dick sense. Do androids dream of electric sheep? And that's kind of full on display here. Like these beings known as Realians, they're fully acknowledged as being artificial. They aren't real humans. They are built. Some of them are saying they were born last month, and here they are. They're they look like full human beings. They like feel, talk, essentially think as them, but they themselves see themselves as something other than human. I don't want to say subhuman, but essentially they do. They view themselves as tools to be used by humans. Their function is to be weapons. Their function is to be fodder. And that's something they implicitly express that they view themselves as. So it's a very interesting dynamic, especially when you look at how Shion approaches them, how the world that the lore that Shion is talking about recognizes them, as opposed to how they recognize themselves and people who oppose that order that recognizes them on the same level as human beings.
Absolutely. The Venn diagram between human and Realian is so heavy on the center whenever you compare it to human versus android or human versus cyborg. And I agree with you both. That angle of having Shion there with expressing her feelings of motherhood towards KOSMOS in a way, juxtaposed with how she feels about Realians in general, is really interesting. And there's depth to that too, and nuance there too. Shion is human, and she does have contradictory feelings, which we're going to explore all of this right now. So I'm just going to dive us right in, which is not what I meant to say, but it's what I said.
It's like you're bad with some proverbs there.
Appropriately enough, yes. So Shion is asked to come and service these Realians. She has specialization that lets her be more knowledgeable about this stuff, but she's not really supposed to. Like, now that she's in a new role at Vector, they kind of frown upon it, but you know, we all work for companies, we know how that goes. She's this weird sort of hybridization of a therapist or like a repair technician here. So when you get to the lab, you go around and you talk to all of these Realians to fix them. What that functionally means is you're tinkering with their personalities or their, bodily functions via their circuits or whatever. It's not really clearly shown. You're talking to them and they'll be expressing their thoughts and feelings, and Shion is like, oh, there's just a malfunction with your OS, and she does some typing and tinkering and fixes it. It's kind of silly, but it works, I think. You mentioned, Chris, you just mentioned the proverbs. There's a Realian here. I love this. There's a Realian who loves proverbs, but is really bad at them. Like, there's several that they say incorrectly, like better safe than curry, casting food before swine, adding insult to perjury. It's really good. He says one of them, and Shion's like, Where did you learn that? And he's like, oh, one of the ship members told me. And she's like, could you what are some others that you like? And he just goes off, and she's like, we're gonna have to get you a book. It's great. Did you guys find the ship member that was teaching them this?
I did, yeah. He's somewhere else in the Woglinde, and it's like, oh, I feel bad for that poor Realian, and I liked how it all connected.
I feel like I did, but the Woglinde was kind of it feels like a fever dream now at this point. But yeah, there was a lot of people to talk to on the ship.
Yeah, he says them wrong too, so you immediately know who he is. Okay. It's great. So once you've adjusted all of these Realians, we get a cutscene and we meet this new guy named Virgil. He is a lieutenant here on the Woglinde, and he's got some serious facial scarring. We've got a couple characters here with facial scarring. It's a very facially scarred game. He comes in and he's sort of immediately painted as this, I don't want to say psycho, but it's clear that something is wrong. He gets right up into a Realian's like chest area and just starts sniffing them, remarking about how they reek. He hates them for some reason. It's not clear why at the moment, but he very clearly does. And he and Shion sort of get into this little miniature debate about are they human? Because Shion refers to them as these people, and Virgil makes it very clear that they're objects. And honestly, Virgil starts by making some good points.
These people have the same intellect and emotions as us. And the Miltia Charter clearly spelled out the basic human rights of Realians when it was ratified in 4763.
What a load of crap. Get off your soapbox. You act noble and preach about humanity, but in the end, they're just equipment as far as your company's concerned. Or maybe more like merchandise.
We don't treat them anything like equipment or merchandise.
Then why do you categorize them as weapons-grade Realians? How much more evidence do you need than that? Whatever you care to call them, they're nothing but tools of warfare.
As far as Shion and her company are concerned, they are merchandise. They're labeled as merchandise. They're sold as merchandise. That's how they're cataloged. They've got SKU numbers practically. And, you know, there's a lot of this where it's kind of hard to argue with them.
It gets in, I mean, that's kind of the crux of the debate here. And that's why it makes it such a difficult conversation. I think it's very well crafted. I think it's very well spoken here in terms of the points between Shion and Virgil. At the end of the day, Shion is a company woman here, and she is a representative of a company that has great interest in these Realians being merchandise. And Virgil is a military man, which means he has keen interest in using them to his advantage as tools. And apparently the Realians here feel that way, that they are tools and they are supposed to be utilized at it. So I think this kind of puts Shion in a very confused position, because she's making this great stand about how they should be on the same line as all of them. But that seems to be almost the minority opinion, even with the people that she's fighting for. And that brings a really interesting angle once again to, you know, can artificial beings really truly be human? What does it mean to be human, and what makes them human over, you know, other androids? Because you know very little about them. You know very little about their creation. And you don't know what's going on with Virgil, other than the fact that you could say he definitely has some PTSD going on, or some sort of past trauma that's influencing his behavior, which I wish we're going to get into something a little bit later, looking at your notes here, that I wish they would go into more. And we'll talk about that when we get to it. But it's definitely a perspective that I think Virgil backs up, especially as you learn further and further into the game, that it's rather justified.
Yeah. So there are a couple of ways that we could go here. So I think a lesser narrative writer, scene designer, whatever, however you want to phrase it, would make this significantly less nuanced. And that's, I think, one of the strengths of Takahashi and Saga throughout this whole series, and with certainly with Xenogears as well, is that this is not black and white whatsoever. This entire debate lives in this gray area. You mentioned the Realians feel the same way. As Shion and Virgil are arguing, one of them steps up and he says to Lieutenant Virgil, he says, "We are merchandise. However, I take great pride in what I do now. And this pride was not forced upon me. It is my own free will." So he comes out, he says it straight up. We have free will. This is my will. You know, this is going to get into the will to power thing that this game is named after, but it's fascinating. They are so self-aware, and they're saying, you know, one of them says a little while later, you know, don't deny us our existence as merchandise or weapons or whatever, because that's to deny our very existence. You know, you have to acknowledge us in this way. It's fascinating, man.
At the same time, like, I think if the player and the reader here is nuanced enough in reading everything that's going on, especially with the fact that you do have Shion directly programming their OS, which does affect their behavioral conditions, is it really their free will, or are they just programmed to believe that it's their free will?
That's a good point.
It is interesting, and I've been pondering as you both have been going on about this. I really do think that
going on, huh?
Yeah, going on and on about this. No, I really do think that the aspect of them introducing this concept of will, and the Realians coming forward and saying, no, I'm doing this of my will, whether or not we're to understand that that's actually the will that is driving them to continue to just be and exist. I think, like, especially because of what we understand of her interactions with other Realians later on in the Woglinde, I'm just kind of taking this at face value, whereas that they are created and it's very much a Frankenstein's monster situation, and is that they start, forming an ego and they start having their own willpower after their creation is, happened. And then of course they're operating within the, defined restrictions of what they are supposed to do with their whatever limited program that they have. And I mean, I think that I am thinking that just because of kind of where I want to, or maybe the idea of how I understand KOSMOS evolves over time as a character. These Realians aren't necessarily operating in the same wavelength as KOSMOS will. And of course, we're going to get into that a little bit later. But clearly, it's like he said, I had take great pride in doing this. And they prove that. They back that up with their actions at several different points throughout the narrative here, where they're acting selflessly on behalf of the humans that they're designated to protect or serve in their respective cases. So I think that I think that what Chris poses is really interesting. The fact that, like, what if at the same time we did want them to have this thought of free will, and that's the whole idea behind it. And that's the reason why they need caretakers to help adjust their mental facilities as they're, being reprogrammed or serviced. It's really fascinating. I enjoyed this entire section.
The way you frame that, it reminds me of Nier Automata in a way, right? Mm-hmm. The Yoko Taro in that game is framing existential human questions using non-human elements, non-human characters. And we're getting that same thing here decades earlier, where we have this notion of what does it mean to have free will? Humans ask that question all the time. Do we have free will, or is fate something that we adhere to? And here we're exploring the same thing, as you've both said. Is this truly the Realians' free will, or is it programmed into them? Is it fate? How does that play out on non-human subjects? It's really fascinating, and we're going to explore more of that as we go on. I don't want to. I wish we had all the time in the world to talk about all of this, because it's really fascinating. But I am going to move us forward a little bit. Chris, you had mentioned the PTSD aspect. Mm-hmm. Shion wonders as Virgil leaves, whether he's a DME addict. And you have to talk to NPCs to kind of get the full grasp of what this means. But DME addiction in this universe is an affliction that you get whenever you consume the flesh of Realians. So now we're verging into cannibalism territory while we are sort of pondering this idea, are these things human? Do they have human rights? Absolutely insane.
Yeah, is it really cannibalism? Because are they, again, I mean, it brings up the question if they're human. I don't want to belabor that point too much here, though. But when it comes to the concept of just having to eat these things, first of all, it's just very strange overall, because even if they're not human, what are they made of that they would be able to be consumed? That could be causing the pain. I mean, obviously, it sounds like they were doing it out of necessity, not just out of a want or a lust to do so, at least at first. And that's probably why he says he can smell them and has all these feelings towards them. Now, that's not the core reason he has the feelings towards them, as we learn much later on. But when you start to really dwell on it, what would drive them to do that? What would cause that pain? And additionally, I think this is a topic that, due to the circumstances of the narrative and due to the circumstances of events that happen shortly and further on, I don't think they really explore as much as they should. And it kind of gets lost actually pretty quickly in comparison to the rest of the storytelling here. Hopefully it does get explained a little bit more, because at the end of this game, it definitely insinuates that we are going to hear more about the backstory of Xenosaga and what's been happening prior to these events. But they're leaving it incredibly vague right now.
Yeah, especially in episode 1. Episode 3 has a DME addiction database entry, but I haven't got to episode 3 yet, so I don't know how this is explored. It is a disease that is not curable, though. So once you have symptoms, all you can do is take medication to maintain withdrawals. That's also why Virgil sometimes acts erratically and looks so scarred. Those are symptoms of it.
I just want to add really briefly here is that apparently there is an episode 1 database entry on it as well. And that once you have consumed the Realian tissue and, form this DME addiction, the treatment is actually to continue consuming Realian tissue to avoid withdrawal symptoms. And that apparently that because there's not a cure, that the consumed Realian tissue, it grows and mutates along with the host's neural networks.
Yeah, you could make a whole story based around this in and of itself.
Yeah.
Also, random here, and this might be way too much of a deep cut. So if it is, I know, Rick, just execute me here. But there's a RPG for the PlayStation 1 called Valkyrie Profile, which was developed by Tri-Ace. Tri-Ace has worked with Namco in the past, specifically, well, not Tri-Ace specifically, but Wolf Team, who made the Tales of series. But anyway, their system of hit points in Valkyrie Profile is called DME, which stands for Divine Materialized Energy. And that is the amount of hit points that you can sustain as hit points, essentially, for your characters, which are all Einherjar, which are souls that are recruited by the gods to fight for Ragnarok. Is that related? I'm not sure. Maybe it's a deep cut. Maybe it's completely random. Maybe I'm wasting some time, but I thought it was interesting.
No, it is interesting. I wish I had played that so I could, so we could start a dialogue about it. That's on the eternal backlog as of right now. So Shion, if we remember from last time, Shion has some field data that she needs to, simulation data that she needs to get to the captain. So now that we're done here, now that we're done playing therapist and getting interrogated by the scariest man on the ship, we are going to go to the captain and deliver the data. This is where, I can't remember, I think we've already met Cherenkov. Yeah, we've met Cherenkov. We go up to the captain's quarters. Cherenkov is there as well. He is pissed that the data is so late and that they don't have field data, because his biggest concern is that if the Gnosis attack right now, they could very well be cooked. We don't know how KOSMOS performs. But he gets a call that is very suspicious. We can't hear it. It's on like a cell phone type device, and he just has to leave. He's like, something urgent's come up. The captain, the actual captain, Moriyama, he's not really that pissed at all. He says, take as much time as you need. The government is funding it anyway, right? So he knows what's up. And we go back to our room from here. We do get some insight on Cherenkov's mysterious call. We get a cutscene of him. He's being scolded via like a Zoom call by somebody important looking over the fatalities of those who touched the Zohar and have disappeared. We saw that in the last episode. So they've had to, quote, move the plan forward 2 phases because they, quote, can't let the Zohar fall into the government's hands. We don't really know what this means right now, and drinking game at home, take a shot every time somebody on this show says that, because it happens a lot.
Yeah.
All we know now is that UMN ships will be crossing ours in a few hours. We don't really know what that means at this time, but it seems like they're going to pick up the Zohar. This scene ends as we learn who this commander's name is. He is Margulis, and he is going to be an important character throughout the rest of this game.
Which is funny because I never remembered his name.
Yeah.
I don't even remember them implicitly stating it either. It's just weird. Do you want to say that it is extremely interesting that, you have Cherenkov here that's getting very upset about KOSMOS not being ready, but it also brings the question, why is KOSMOS on the ship in the first place then? If they knew that she wasn't ready prior to this mission, which it seems that they feel would directly involve the Gnosis. There's a lot of, it almost seems like they're set up for failure, but they're kind of not. Like something is known, but it's not supposed to be known. But also that doesn't really make sense in the grand scheme either.
Yeah, I get the sense that the whole setup for failure thing is going to be a very reoccurring theme, particularly when it comes to the folks who are involved with the UMN. It seems that they have clear knowledge, like the higher government body or the council that's presiding over these forces have much more knowledge about the Zohar and Vector and KOSMOS than we're led to believe as the audience in the very beginning. It definitely does seem a little bit set up to fail for sure.
Yeah, either way, we are being intentionally kept in the dark. That is something that Takahashi and Saga did in Xenogears as well. It's just their style of storytelling.
Something that I wanted to ask really briefly about the work that they did in Xenogears is that did they circle back to this theme again of like what is human? I think you might have mentioned that previously, but did they have questioned the same themes about humanity versus like juxtaposed against the ideas of Gnosticism and Christianity or proto-Christianity in that game as well?
I'm not prepared to make a definitive statement because quite honestly, I have forgotten a lot of the finer points of Xenogears. That in particular, Xenogears is more critical of religion itself as a whole, and it directly involves using elements of Jungian psychology. I don't remember if there is like, what does it mean to be human, if that is a central theme of Xenogears. I'm leaning towards no, but I honestly, I don't remember.
Gotcha.
It is a central theme of Xenoblade.
Interesting. Okay. That's, again, eternal backlog.
Exactly.
We do get some brief downtime here with Shion. She's chatting with her brother Jin, who is a major character in episode 2. I don't think that's a spoiler, and if it is, I'm really sorry. But she's chatting with him via call. She hasn't been home in like 2 years. And Shion, Shion's a working gal. She's a work girly. She doesn't understand why this is a big deal. But we do have this really interesting dream here. She takes a nap, and we get this classic Xeno series dream. It's black and white entirely, and we're in a foggy graveyard. We hear the famous ding. This is straight out of Xenogears with Faye. Mm-hmm. We hear that ding, and we see the girl in white again. Remember the girl that looks like a young version of Shion, kind of, all dressed in white. And out of the fog walks a silhouette of a stranger who we will meet soon in this episode, in this, part of our series. A quick shot of the actual sleeping Shion in real life shows the girl in white as an apparition standing next to her, looking out into space. So at this time, as I'm playing through, I'm wondering to myself, is she a helpful warning or is she a hostile warning to Shion? Is she appearing out of aggression and defensiveness, or is she appearing to be of some sort of help, to be of a warning? It's really unclear right now, but we really can't be sure.
I'm going to be honest. I thought the girl in white was typical anime trope-ish kind of stuff. Like, oh, here's a character, mysterious. That's kind of what I got from her. And I like, it didn't really impress me. I just think it's because I've seen this. I don't know if it's tropic at the time or if it was tropic when it goes back to Xenogears, but I just find it very, very tropic when you have these mysterious dream characters that don't really tell you anything and you don't know anything about and what it kind of means. So like, it's a character I know I'm going to find out more about later. That's going to have a big revelation about the history of my character, and I better pay attention to it. But that's just like anime 101.
I agree with that. And you also, it's one thing that I immediately harkened back to was Ghost in the Shell, which is a kind of a huge inspiration, I think, for this piece of work as we're playing through it. But yeah, I could completely agree. This is like, you hear the ding. All I was waiting for was those red flowers to pop up on screen, and then we're going to really get going somewhere.
Yeah, all right. I liked it, but whatever.
It doesn't mean I don't like it. It just means it's like, okay, I know what's going on here.
So Shion is woken up by blaring alarms. The alarm is going off all over the ship. It doesn't appear to be a Gnosis. It turns out KOSMOS is waking up. Why? Nobody knows. Nobody has any idea. Only Shion has the direct ability to do this. So she's just as confused as everybody else. She's in total disbelief. And she wonders, is the situation from 2 years ago happening once more? And we get this really brief flashback of this massacre. Like, everybody's laying dead, including her former boyfriend, Kevin. And KOSMOS is standing there. Kevin is in Shion's arms, and KOSMOS in her previous iteration with the gold armor is sort of standing there. I don't think there's any symbolism in the gold or blue that I can think of anyway. Maybe I'm wrong. Feel free to write in, color theory experts. But at any rate, almost immediately what the warning detection picked up on appears. It's Gnosis in the flesh for the first time. They just seem to sort of apparate into existence. outside of the ship, giant hordes of them, some big, some small. They're giant fish and whale-like creatures of varying shades of gray and green and brown and yellow, and they begin to launch attacks on our ship. How do you feel about the Gnosis as creatures? Let's just say visually, I guess right now. Like, what do we think about them? I can't remember if we talked about this in the last episode.
I'll let Nick go first, but I'll say very quickly. Darius tried to warn you about the ship enemies. You didn't listen.
Who did?
Darius.
I don't know who that is.
Yeah, who is he, Chris?
The Shmup series, where you fight fish.
I'm completely unfamiliar.
Yeah, me too.
Damn it.
Sorry. That one's a little bit over my head.
No.
Yeah,
Shmups and beat 'em ups, man. They're they're not my kind of genres.
Yeah, I will say I really like the Gnosis. I think that their character design, especially the Gnosis that we see walking around on the ship, and kind of seeing the Gnosis out in space, and I think that, like, just as a side note, when talking about, because I went and rewatched a few cutscenes as well on YouTube to prepare for our conversation today, but the display, like the art in this cutscene, is really, really striking and brilliant. You see the galaxies in the background, and you see the Gnosis kind of phase out of reality or whatever hyper drive that they're in, and all of a sudden immediately the ships start firing their cannons off. I think that the Gnosis are this is really, really good for the time this game came out, to kind of show that no, they're not ships, they're just giant organisms that are going around that might also be ships, ? Because there is, like, what they refer to later as a mothership. But I just think that it's really cool. And then, of course, like, the actual enemy designs that you see in combat scenarios are interesting. They start to get a little bit into the territory of kind of not having a lot of definition, but they're just faceless monsters, really.
I just like how they're seemingly organic, but yet at the same time inorganic enemies that have no real definition. Like, they look familiar enough so you could associate them with various animals or things in reality, but yet at the same time they're different enough that they look entirely foreign and alien compared to what you're used to seeing. Like, there's no explanation for why they exist the way they do. It's just very strange. And I mean, they're amorphous, they're gelatinous, but they're also ghost-like. It's hard to put your finger on it, and it's hard to, like, understand. I do think it, like, the first time I saw it, it's very weird. Like you said, Rick, they're giant space whales. They look like giant sperm whales coming out of nowhere in space, and that's like their main carrier vessel. And then you're talking about all sorts of other monstrosities that are there in the forms they take. And you see stuff that I don't know, some sort of humanoid, or, like, I guess ape, or some insects or stuff like that all have different functions and attacks towards you. Once you get into the fighting of them, of course, which will come a little bit later, but not too much later. And it's just a very strange enemy, and it's not really explained, because right now in this world as well, and even through the end of the game, it's not completely understood exactly what these things are. It's just, they're bad, and you have certain circumstances in which you have to deal with them.
Yes. It's not fully explained exactly what they are in this game. I am wondering if that does get explained further into the series. I also think it's really interesting that they functionally are named knowledge, and they are dangerous, right? I don't know if that actually means anything, but it is. I mean, I don't think it was an accident.
They're regardless. They're false. Yeah, they're false. Yeah. What is it? Seath. They're Seath.
Yeah, one of those several similar proper nouns. Yeah, I'm kind of with you all. I think they're very interesting. It's not what I was expecting. They're not my favorite monsters of all time, but I think they're pretty cool. I think the fact that they're so familiar, but at the same time evade the ability to be recognized as something in our world, I think that lends to their sort of creepiness. It's a very, very indescribable horror kind of. Who's that horror author that always uses that trick?
It's not Lovecraft, is it?
Yes, Lovecraft. Yes, Thank you. It's sort of like that.
I was going to say Junji Ito.
No. Everybody in the ship begins to mobilize. Virgil especially is all too eager to see the Realians be essentially turned into human living shields because they don't pilot eggs of their own. So the Gnosis infiltrate and casualties start to occur almost immediately. And they have this special property where they are not part of our dimension. They kind of live between theirs and ours, enough such that they can interact with us, but we can't interact with them. And the only way to bring them in is for somebody like KOSMOS to use the Hilbert effect that forces them into our reality. We saw them try to test this at the end of their simulation with Shion and KOSMOS. That's where things got a little crazy and Alan had to pull her out. But we'll see more of that here pretty soon because KOSMOS is extremely close to waking up. Well, actually, she wakes up right now. The power goes out and KOSMOS's pod opens. This is a really cool scene because there's next to no sound. This is one of the times where I think that's used to great effect. There's no sound. Everybody is shaking with fear. They're terrified because they remember this situation that happened 2 years ago where she single-handedly massacred their entire ship. So she gets out and she's scanning them, and via her visor, she's able to locate exactly where Shion's at. And this is the first time she removes her visor and she sets off on a mission. She doesn't even interact with anybody here.
I will say that the introduction of KOSMOS, I think, is incredible. The lighting, the obviously the silence that comes along with it, and then obviously her intimidating presence as she's stepping out and walking towards the scientist. It's just all done again to, as you said, Rick, great effect. And I think it impressed upon me just the severity of how important this character is going to be to the rest of the series.
Important and terrifying. Like, we don't know what she's capable of. At this point, we've only heard tales. We get to see it a little bit later in a flashback. But for all we know, she is a hair's trigger away from turning on everybody.
I think it was harder for me to buy into that idea just because, like, she's on the box and she's going to be in your party. So I was never feeling too terrified of her. I think that's just because the game lets you know that you really have nothing to fear for her. Not so much the game in terms of the narrative in and of itself, but in terms of everything outside of the game. Even, with the eventual sequels, these are things you already know. To no fault of this game, of course. But like, if you look in the manual, she's a party member. She's key to the marketing of this game. So any sort of threat that's supposed to be imposed or any sort of questions about her motivations are somewhat like minimalized just because of the overall marketing of this game.
I suppose so. For now, Shion's got to try and find KOSMOS. One frustrating thing here is engaging in battle with these Gnosis, even accidentally, is an immediate game over. Not actually. You have to go through the battle animations, but they will do 9999 damage to you, and you immediately die. You can't escape. So you touch one, you're dead, and you better have saved because you have to reload. Really frustrating. I think this is the worst decision they could have possibly made. That's just me.
Did you ever run into any of them?
Yes.
Oh no.
Yes, I did. Especially there's a segment address that you can get while you're exploring here, and there's a Gnosis right by it. You have to sort of sneak past it, but if you don't, or if they just happen to turn around, you're done because it's like in a little tiny room. It sucks.
Oh, that's awful.
One thing that's kind of cool is the tag mini game that you got to play earlier with the with the soldiers that just had a bit of whimsy about them that wanted to just play tag to pass the time. Mm-hmm. That's how you can escape around most of these Gnosis here. Like, they will chase you.
In handy.
Yeah, I think that's really neat.
Yeah.
At a certain point, Shion's going to round a corner, and she is met with a blockade of Realians and Eggs pilots. Virgil's there, and they just rain a comical amount of bullets and hell and fire down onto her.
Yeah,
that's great.
And through the biggest plot armor I have ever seen, she immediately stops and she raises one leg and cowers her head behind her hands, and there's just bullets just nonstop, just fucking going, and they miraculously miss. Every single bullet misses her.
What do you think you're doing? Those bullets could have killed me.
What are we doing?
What the hell do you think you're doing running around like an idiot? We thought you were a Gnosis.
Look, I've got my own problems problems to deal with. Here I am getting attacked by the Gnosis. I'm getting lost at every turn, and don't give me a hard time right now.
It's hilarious. I mean, she lays it on to Virgil. She's like, what the fuck do you think you're doing? And, well, she doesn't say that. They don't swear like that in this game. But it's pretty funny. And he's like, what are you doing walking around? It's great.
What we've learned is that the Realians are stormtroopers.
Functionally, yes.
Correct.
It's good they don't have eggs because they're not hitting anything anyway.
No.
So we don't have much time to laugh at the scene because Gnosis suddenly just warped through the walls and they take a few eggs pilots down. Of course, the bullets aren't working because, they're not in our plane of existence. One of the Realians, I think this is here where they, tell Shion, like, don't worry about saving us. This is literally what we were made to do or born to do, I think is the verbiage they might use, which is just such a fascinating contrast between the Realians and the soldiers here. The soldiers who are feeling fear and the Realians who embrace their duty. It's fascinating. They tell Shion to escape. Gnosis continue to murder everyone in sight. One of them even picks up a gun, which is hysterical to me.
Yeah.
That was great. It's not looking good.
It's looking real bad.
Yes. I forget how we learn this, but it seems like the Gnosis are after the Zohar that we have.
It's kind of inferred through a lot of conversations that you're having with people if you navigate your way around the Woglinde, that, just it's inferred. And I think what is it? Cherenkov kind of hints at it through other conversations. I can't remember specifically why, but it is hinted at. Yes.
I think the captain also says it too, as they're kind of, they're triaging the situation in terms of what damage has been done to the ship and, how they can fight back against that mothership too. He says, oh, they're after that thing, aren't they?
Yeah. There's a lot of everyone's been on edge a lot recently since that thing's been in here as well.
Exactly.
I love world building like that. I love that Takahashi and Saga are so keen on doing that, where you just talk to people to learn about the world. It does make it a little difficult to explain in a podcast, though, since you're kind of getting things piecemeal all the time. They should have had us in mind, quite frankly, when they made the game.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely. Why weren't you thinking of podcasts in 2003?
Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
Mine specifically.
Yeah.
You jerks. You had mentioned that Cherenkov knows about this. That's true. He's suited up. It looks like he's going to run outside into space. He's planning to gate jump with the Zohar to get it to Margulis. He says the commander, I think we can assume Margulis. Everybody tells him it's a bad idea. He doesn't care. He says Gnosis are nothing compared to it if it awakens. Unclear as to what that means. Could be KOSMOS because he doesn't know that she's awake yet.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
It's fascinating. We don't know.
I don't think it's ever truly answered either. Maybe it is. If it is KOSMOS, it is. But if not, it's not in this game.
And there's some further ambiguity thrown in there with a line from somebody else later on, which we will certainly get to today. But for now, we are back with Shion, Virgil, and the eggs. They're still shooting, even though it's doing absolutely nothing. There are lots of really cinematic shots here, though. It's very cool. It's almost action movie-like. It's really well done. But, after a while, soldiers and Realians are all lying dead as Gnosis are moving forward. And this is where Virgil's military instincts kick in. His goal is to survive. And he is going to do that by using the overrides for the Realians' control mechanisms to use them as puppets. In his eggs, he somehow manages to yoink Shion's tablet from her with the gigantic eggs robot fingers, and he takes it out of her pocket. I don't know how he does this, but he lays out his plan. He's like, I'm gonna override them, and they will be my puppets, and this is how we will live. And this is where he also freely admits to eating the Realian flesh, going so far as to call them delicious. It's how he knew about the override code. He has been inside of them quite literally, so he knows exactly where it's at, and he plans to activate it. When he does, they kind of start squirming on the floor like puppets, like he has control over them. And Shion protests, but of course, he's a military guy. He says, "That's what peacetime is for, lady. You think I don't know the Miltian Charter?" and begins to just cite it verbatim to her, saying how this is why they are fitted with this function. And Shion is speechless. He has a great line too. He says, "I am the conductor and I intend to make full use of my orchestra."
As much as you hate him, like, you kind of have to admit that he kind of is justified in his logic, in his line of thinking, whether or not, it's the time for this, or actually, whether or not his plan would even matter, considering that they literally cannot affect the Gnosis in any way at this point. You got to admit that guy has a point.
Yeah.
It's easy for us to hate him, but if we were in that situation, I don't think we could truly say what we would do if we were in that situation, because it is so life-threatening and we aren't in it. You know what I mean? It's like the thing where, if I were at the scene of the crime, I would have done this. You wouldn't have. It's impossible to judge because we are so far removed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And as it's said earlier, I mean, they're tools. He views them as tools. And I think, like, there's this line, I'm going to let you say it because these are your notes, of course, but there's a part that's coming up now.
You can say it.
Oh, sure. Okay, fine. But thank you. But when Virgil starts saying to Shion here, because she gets upset, these Realians are going to be used as tools to, just going on a suicide bombing, essentially. He just asks her, okay, so why haven't you disabled it? It's factory loaded, but you of all people shouldn't have any trouble removing it, and yet you don't.
Tell me, why haven't you disabled that function? Sure, it's factory loaded, but you of all people shouldn't have any trouble removing it. Since you care about them so much, all it would take is a little tweak, and they'd be free as birds. And yet you don't. Why not?
Because company protocol dictates...
Exactly. It's protocol. In other words, you're just like me, bound by that protocol. We're the ones that give them a reason to live. Am I wrong?
But
That's the difference between us and them. Am I wrong? So why not give it to them? A meaning to their pitiful existence.
Yeah, it's like she's like taking the line of, I didn't do it because I was just following orders. And that made me good, right? And yeah, it's kind of chilling because she's like, I am this benevolent lover of Realians, but she is the one that could have truly given them free will and truly not made them puppets. But she didn't because she's bound by her work. She's bound by her company. And she decided not to do it. And she's starting to realize, or even question, probably more questions the right word, why she decided not to, or what her place is in all of this.
I find it fascinating too, because she is also supposed to be looked at as the preeminent scientific mind of her field, of their time. Like, she is the best of the best. That's why she was designated for the KOSMOS project. So it's conflicting as well, because so many interactions with Shion, whenever anytime anyone asks Shion about herself, you get vague answers, or you get half truths, or you get something that's deflected into another conversation from her. She rarely ever talks about herself. So as much as we kind of know about her, she's largely a very mysterious individual. And like, you're still kind of, at this point, this is where me as the player, I'm starting to kind of question her motivations, particularly when it comes to her interactions with both KOSMOS and the Realians.
I love that she's painted that way. She is characterized as exceedingly human. She's a walking amalgamation of contradictions, as we all are. Yeah. And nowhere is that more apparent than here. This is why I praise the writing in the Xeno games so much, is because they do not fall. I mean, yes, they fall into anime tropes. Of course they do. But they don't fall into tropes that make, how to phrase this? They know when to use them for advancement of plot or aesthetic purposes, and they know when to shirk them for interesting writing. And I love that Shion is not the classic, do-gooder protagonist that has a heart of gold.
Right.
That's boring.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fun. Like Tidus and Zidane, we love them. Like, they're Locke, we love them. But it's boring.
I also think what's interesting in this scene is that you've been led up to believe the entire time that the Realians are these fearless, beings that don't mind throwing themselves at danger or don't mind sacrificing themselves. And you're led to believe that right before you get to the scene, as you pointed out, the alien saying, go ahead. It doesn't matter if we die. That's what we're born to do. But as they are being controlled as puppets, you can tell that they are like physically trying to resist, and they do not want to be party to this, even though it is their duty.
Oh, that's interesting. That was not a read that I clocked in on.
So it shows like maybe the duality of realians. You're told that they are duty bound and this is their own free will and it's fine with them. But yet when they're being dragged to blow a hole here in the middle of the spaceship to save everybody else, they are visibly wishing that they could resist it.
Furthering that duality and the comparison to humans.
Yes.
Perhaps even. It's fascinating stuff. So Virgil does cause them to explode. He overrides them. They latch onto a Gnosis. It explodes. The bridge collapses. And the one Gnosis, or maybe a couple, do fall, but there's one that's on the other side, and it just floats over through the air. Doesn't matter that the bridge has exploded, and Virgil just yells, "Son of a bitch!" and starts shooting. Oh, it's so fun. I don't think it's supposed to be funny, but it is great. Virgil is injured at this point pretty badly, and it's at this point a Gnosis actually grabs Shion, which turns out to be extremely important later on. And in this moment, she sort of accepts her death. She has some inner monologues with herself, and the girl in white appears yet again. And, she's thinking, no, you can't be here. Like, I guess this is how I die. But in that moment, KOSMOS just blasts through the fucking wall. And Alan is right behind her. Everybody else has escaped, is what Alan tells us. And here is where KOSMOS activates the Hilbert effect and just begins kicking the ever-living shit out of all of these Gnosis. It is awesome to see. I loved this scene.
It's so cool. It's so cool. Like seeing her come alive and, kind of live in that anime action fight scene. It's done really, really well. And this is the point where I was playing and I was frankly, and I don't know, Chris, Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't expect action like this from a game that came out in, was it 2004? Like I wasn't expecting this level of violence and action, and I'm sitting here in 2024 just eating it up with a spoon. I was like, this is incredible. Where can I get some more of this?
I love the straight action scene vibes here because they set it up perfectly. It seems incredibly hopeless that you're going to be able to do anything to these Gnosis creatures, and then all of a sudden someone that is going to be joining your party is just ripping them to shreds. And you're like, okay, now this is going to get good. When do I start to actually be able to kick some ass myself?
Yeah, perfect use of character irony. Is that what you call it when the player knows something but the characters don't? I don't know. Jenny's now in the Discord. She can correct me.
Yes.
Yeah, this is great. KOSMOS says that we're going to the hangar because it is her duty to verify the integrity of the Zohar and protect it and Vector employees, which I don't think Shion knew that first part, but, there's not time to argue because more Gnosis come in, and now they're all wielding guns, which never gets old to me. It's so funny. By the time we get to the hangar, there's still loads of fighting, and, they're hitting off the Gnosis, and KOSMOS is scanning around. We see this from her point of view. And Virgil is in her line of sight, and she just fires into him without hesitation. She's wielding one of her Gatling guns and just unloads into his back, pushing him down, killing him, to get to the Gnosis behind him. And as he's dying, we see this brief flash in his mind's eye of a woman that he refers to as Feb, which I think is a reference to Febronia of Nisbis or of Syria, to Holy Virgin Martyrs. I don't know if this is just a reference that means something or just a reference just to use a name, but with Takahashi, it could be either. And as he's bleeding out, KOSMOS, this is actually one of the times where I think the art style gets a little creepy. We kind of zoom in on her face, and she's got those lifeless eyes, and she's just mowing down Gnosis.
I think it's great.
I love this scene.
I love it.
Shion is obviously enraged. She wants so desperately for KOSMOS to be human and feel emotions and morals.
Why did you shoot Lieutenant Virgil? With your power, you don't have to sacrifice anyone to...
At that time, Lieutenant Virgil was in my direct line of fire. Any changes in my firing position to avoid Lieutenant Virgil while protecting you would have resulted in a 30% depreciation in my offensive capabilities. On the other hand, with the Lieutenant's death, there would only be a 0.2% drop in efficacy. I simply chose the option with the highest probability to keep you alive. Furthermore, the escape pod has a maximum capacity of 2 occupants. I believe it is obvious who gets priority.
How can you even say that? Have you no conscience?
Shion, you forget I am not human. I am merely a weapon. You, of all people, should be well aware of that fact.
I love it. I love this.
Yeah, I think she specifically keeps going back to efficiency as well. She says, this is the best way to make sure that my operational efficiency, in order to keep you all alive, that this was the best course of action, and just didn't even blink for a second. And yeah, I love, obviously her indicating to Shion, that you of all people, you should know this. This is, you were the one that was, began to program me. And it's just this interesting, I can't help myself. And please, let me know if you disagree or not, but I just can't help myself to continuously think of Shion as a Dr. Frankenstein styled figure in this narrative, because she created something, and I don't think that she either fully understands it, or she just wants it to be she so desperately wants it to be something that it's not. And I find that whole idea fascinating, especially when it's sitting, in this far future, 4,000 years into the future sci-fi setting. I just think it's very important. And obviously this is an important moment for KOSMOS to understand where she is now as a character moving forward.
I wouldn't doubt that that's a reference because we do explicitly meet 2 twins later named Mary and Shelley.
Yes.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yep.
Yeah.
I also think this scene is very important. It's in terms of Shion's development and showing Shion's mentality towards KOSMOS. And you see it a little bit more later because this is an ongoing thing that develops over the game. But if you compare it and contrast her feelings towards Realians, which she views as being autonomous and being very much human, and her stance on them having rights the same as humans do, and to their own free will and so on and so forth. But yet when KOSMOS doesn't behave in the manner that she wants her to or expects her to, she becomes frustrated and almost demands that she acts in a manner that she believes that she should. So she's not, even though KOSMOS isn't a Realian, she's not extending that same autonomy towards KOSMOS, even though it is heavily indicated that KOSMOS was supposed to be designed to have a similar autonomy to Realians.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And that's something that Shion is going to do throughout the rest of the game, just get frustrated and perplexed as to why KOSMOS is not behaving as human. This leads into this last scene leads into a little Gnosis boss battle. I don't really have a lot to say about it. It's just if you don't take out the 2 lackeys on either side, classic JRPG early boss. If you don't take out the lackeys, it can be pretty tough. But it was fine.
It was fun. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it particularly because it kind of gave me a little bit more of an opportunity to understand the boost mechanic and how different characters can go ahead of their turn, or how you can use, either guard to save your AP and then wait to use a different character for healing, that sort of thing. So I think it was good. Like you said, early boss, it was a good time.
This isn't the boss yet that if you don't know how to boost properly will just utterly destroy you, is it?
No, that comes much later.
Okay. Then, this boss battle must have been fine because I don't remember the specifics about it.
So we load into the escape pod. That's another reason that KOSMOS cites earlier. She's like, this escape pod only has room for 2. Virgil wouldn't have fit anyway, which is cold-blooded, but statistically speaking.
Yep.
So she loads us in, and she's going to stay behind fighting as the ship just gets absolutely blown apart. And after it's over, she's standing on the debris in space, and she speaks to someone, KOSMOS does, confirming that the Zohar that the Gnosis just stole because they did make their way off with it, wasn't a real one. It was an emulator. So she hits the Gnosis before they disappear with a tracking device and heads to Second Miltia as planned. We don't know who KOSMOS is reporting to here. Neither does Shion. This is not something that's revealed to us anytime soon.
So are the Gnosis Nintendo?
I don't have a good comeback to that. I'm not gonna lie. Cherenkov, there's a little comedy beat. Cherenkov is also out here in his spacesuit, like clinging to the debris, or to the escape pod, I should say, because he's the third wheel, so he can't fit inside. Which it certainly looks spacious enough inside. There are just only 2 seats. Maybe oxygen levels. I don't know.
It's the Titanic all over again. Yeah. Sorry, Jack. There's only room for 2 people in the space pod. Got to sit out there and float.
I just imagine, if they have boosters on that little, space pod, they're going around G curves. If you're in there unsecured, you just turn into, splatter on the inside, right?
Yeah. So we are about to meet some new friends on a new ship. Tony, Hammer, and Captain Matthews. You guys want to talk about those 3 for a sec?
I like them.
So Chris, you've played Xenogears, so Hammer, that should be raising some flags, bro.
Is that... I barely remember anything about Xenogears, but that's the guy who says mad skills, right?
Yeah, and calls everybody bro.
Bro,
things
mad
like that.
skills, bro.
He's what is he? Is he a camel or a tapir?
He's an animal. Tapir is probably a better way to describe him, yeah. If I'm remembering things correctly.
Yeah, no spoilers for Xenogears, but this Hammer does not do what our previous Hammer
not at all
has done.
No, not even close.
I do like the captain, though. You morons. That's it's classic.
His catchphrase.
Yeah, classic junker hauler, 2004 Captain in Space vibe. I like it. And his, I think, doesn't his hat say, like, I'm a boozer?
Yes. It says, caution, I am a boozer with smiley faces. And then it says, bonsai, bonsai. And I am in another server, the Retrograde Amnesia server. We are trying to get these custom made.
Let's go. Oh my goodness.
I need one of these hats.
Oh,
caution, I am a boozer. I love it. They are scrappers. That's kind of their profession. They find debris and they sell it for profit. And Captain Matthews tries to refer to them as like recyclers, but no, they're I think Tony might or Hammer might say it, one of them, but they're like, yeah, we're kind of like vultures. Is pretty much what they do.
Kicks him in the back of the head and says, shut up.
You moron.
Tony and Matthews, they're going on arguing, and as they're doing that, KOSMOS flies right into the ship. They thought that she was debris, and then they saw her, and they're like, oh, it's just a cadaver, who cares? But KOSMOS hits the ship, and she stands up, freaks everybody out, and they begin communication. KOSMOS says they need to gate jump to Second Miltia right now, and the crew is like, you fucking serious? They're like, we're not doing that. And KOSMOS, she's like, I'm not asking. She's like, if you say no, I will just commandeer the ship. And she's like, I could break this window. And they're like, oh, what's a little old lady like you gonna do? So she punches it with the exact amount of force to crack the entire windshield. And she's like, one more, and this is done, and we all die. Well, you all die. So they don't really have a choice here.
Like, yeah, sure, come on board.
It's great. I was hooked at this point. I was like, who is KOSMOS reporting to? And why? Why is Shion have no idea about this?
I thought it was particularly interesting that she we'll find out a little bit later when you get into the details here, but she wants to separate from Shion. She does not want Shion following her around. Which again, it's like I'm starting to scratch my head and wonder, who's really steering the ship here? It wasn't Shion supposed to be the one that programmed her from the start. So it's it's definitely fascinating. And especially once they give her the go ahead, all right, I guess we have no choice. Come on aboard. There's this really interesting piece of camera work where she bounces or she pushes off the ship and calls in the pod that looks like it looks like her pod where she was awoken from. That was on the actual the main government ship that they were out in deep space on, and then she guides that into the cargo bay. I just thought it was really beautifully done, and kind of the camera does this interesting wrapping around her body as she's calling that in. It's neat.
Yeah, this game reminds me of the Yakuza series, not just because of how long the cutscenes are. I am not exaggerating. Between the Gnosis fight and the next time we gain control of somebody, it had to have been 40 minutes.
Yeah, solid.
But it's also just very cinematic in a similar way that the Yakuza games are too. I really like it. The game has a lot of flaws, but
yeah,
it is very cool cinematic-wise. Once KOSMOS is inside, what a coincidence, they catch Shion and Alan on the comms channel from their rescue pod. Which, Cherenkov is still kind of holding on outside. KOSMOS gives them the lowdown on what's happening. She's like, you two will just sit there and wait for backup. I'm going to second Milsha. Those are my orders. And Shion basically starts treating her like a very austere mother. She isn't having any of this shit. And, well, okay, maybe this isn't what any healthy mother would do. But she's like, I'm going to open the hatch. I'm not projecting, I swear. She's like, I'm going to open the hatch and kill Alan and I if you don't bring us on board. And Alan is like, what? You're crazy. Like, you're not going to do that. And Shion like actually begins to start to open it up and sets the alarms off. And Alan's like, holy shit, she's crazy.
Yeah, because KOSMOS tries to call her bluff. She's like, do whatever you want. That's fine. And then she's like, no, actually, I will do this. And then you see KOSMOS kind of just like, you imagine in her head, she's running the calculations.
Well, it's interesting because I got the impression that she would have just let them do it.
Really?
Because like you said, she is running the calculations and she's like, you will do best to stay there. You're probably not going to run out of oxygen. It's possible, but it's highly unlikely. You should be rescued in like, what does she say, a few days or something like
15, 16 hours or something.
Yeah, because they have 48 hours of oxygen. So they said, wait for 15 hours.
That's right.
Yeah, you should be saved.
That's right. And, Shion is prepared to actually do this. Alan is basically doing everything but peeing his pants. And then this is why I think that she would have done it, Nick. We see a new character enter. It's the same silhouette that we saw in that previous dream. A young tan boy with white hair walks in and just says, why not help them? This character's name is Chaos. All lowercase, contrasting to KOSMOS's all uppercase and KOSMOS being a Greek word that means order. This was all intentional.
What does chaos mean?
Chaos? I don't know. Ask Jack Garland, man.
Is that the protagonist for Final Fantasy Limp Bizkit series?
Yes.
What is it? Okay,
Strangers in
Paradise. Yes, that's the one. Okay.
He says, why not help them? And then he begins to talk to the crew, but we don't hear any of it because we go to KOSMOS's point of view. And she replays him entering. We saw him as the player walk in. KOSMOS's point of view, her vision, like she's playing a playback in the corner of her like little visor. It's like as soon as he enters the frame, the scene cuts out and it makes it look like he's just appearing, like apparating like a divine being. And it does this over and over and over. We are meant to notice this. And we don't know why. Is this a malfunction? Does he have some kind of control over time and space that we aren't privy to? But he basically single-handedly convinces them to bring Shion and Alan on board. And what I find interesting about this, to tie it back to why I think that KOSMOS would have done this, is he puts his arm or his hand on her shoulder or something and, says like, oh, what's the harm? Like, let's bring him on. And KOSMOS is absolutely speechless. And for the first time, she goes into a meek pose. She has one arm at her side and the other arm reaches across her body to hold onto her other arm around the bicep. It's a classic pose of feeling you're diminishing yourself. You're feeling meek. You're feeling
insecure,
defensive, insecure. Yes, and we have never seen this behavior from KOSMOS. So what is his deal?
I didn't notice any of this. Sorry.
Oh no, yeah, dude. Like, go back and check it out. It happens just like that. And like, that plus the crew kind of looking at him with this like very mild sort of reverence. It's like, and being that we saw his silhouette in the dream, what is his deal? So fascinating. We don't learn any of this in this episode. By the way, in Xenosaga Episode I, we don't know what Chaos's deal is. That is for future games, frustratingly.
Yeah.
Chaos is... I'm going to get into who my least favorite character is towards the end of this game, and for reasons. But and we've already met that character. But Chaos is my second least favorite character in this game because I feel like Chaos is not developed whatsoever. And there's more mystery than anything to Chaos. Outside of one line of dialogue at the end of the game, Chaos is not developed in the slightest. And it's a damn shame.
Yeah, not in Episode 1.
No.
He is a major character in Episode 2. I don't know about 3. They change his voice actor in Episode 2, and it's extremely off-putting.
Boo.
It's very
I
weird.
hate it.
Yeah, good old Episode 2.
Question really quick. Do Saga and I think it's Takahashi continue their, like, is it did they write episodes 1, 2, and 3? Didn't it almost didn't the series almost end up being more if they had done enough commercial success?
It's supposed to be 6.
It was supposed to be 6.
Yes.
Okay, yes. I think we did cover that earlier.
By the time 1 was being put together, he said that he had up through Episode 5 already planned out.
Wow.
So I think Episode 1 originally was supposed to be what we got as Episode 1 and 2. Like, it was supposed to be one big game. But, ambitions and deadlines and money, what can you do? Back on the ship, Shion scolds KOSMOS for going off of Shion's orders, I should say. And KOSMOS basically just ignores her. We still don't know who gave her the orders to go to Second Miltia, but, KOSMOS, it kind of de-escalates the situation. She's like, Shion, I need maintenance. I'm going to go down. Is that okay? And Shion's like, yeah, that's fine. But Chaos has a really weird line here. One of the other members, I don't know, I think it may have been Tony or Hammer, just kind of calls her a battle weapon. And he says, is that so, huh? She looks just like any other human to me.
Huh.
So again, this goes back to Chris's complaint, like he is all mystery and no development in this game. But we are very clearly is getting set up for some kind of revelation with him in the future. Also, just pointing this out, he's a party member. His battle animations are angelic. He gets wings at a certain point, like for certain moves.
So does another one.
Yes. We never find out in Episode 1, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's very, very strange. The thing is, too, is that the other one, the character, and we have not met this character yet, so I don't want to dive into what I'm talking about here. The other character, it's semi-explained, even though not totally explained. There is just no explanation as to why Chaos gets angel wings at all. Zero. And have either of you played Skies of Arcadia?
No, unfortunately not.
Unfortunately not.
That's another game I started getting major vibes about here with Chaos. Because I not to try to spoil that game or anything like that, if I could even remember the spoilers. But like the divine race in Skies of Arcadia that comes down, that really tries to make an effect in that world, were known as the silver-haired people. So I immediately got parallels between the two games, which I thought was interesting. Probably not related at all, but I did think it was something I picked up on, and maybe that has something to do with Chaos.
It's possible. We're about to find out more mystery about Chaos because a Gnosis jumps on board of the ship and phases inside. Again, bullets aren't working. KOSMOS isn't around. Right now, Cherenkov gets grabbed. And I don't remember if we mentioned this, but the Gnosis have the ability to turn living beings into like pillars of salt, sort of like in the Book of Job. Like they can calcify you, and then that kind of breaks your physical body. That starts to happen to Cherenkov here. Chaos walks up and just raises his hand, which freezes everything. And one little light tap on the Gnosis's arm, it disintegrates entirely. Like, this is just a power we have not witnessed before. And, Shion, I think it's Shion, or maybe Alan, are like, what the hell was that?
Mm-hmm.
And Chaos says this.
There are those who draw well, and those who run fast. Hammer's navigational skills are top-notch, and his knowledge of the net is vast. Tony's helmsmanship skills are unrivaled. No one even comes close. Or so he claims. The captain? Well, no one holds a greater amount of debt than the captain.
Ah, yes. Hey, wait a second.
I believe everyone has at least one skill that they excel in over all others. It's something that defines who they are. Shion, what is it that defines you?
Huh? Me? Well,
It's the same for me. It's just something I can do.
And nobody bats an eye except for Alan. Like, those are not the same as what you just did.
Yeah.
That was a little off-putting because up to this point, they had no idea how to fight the Gnosis. And here comes in KOSMOS with her Hilbert effect,
Mm-hmm.
which seems unique and very singular in order of the way that it addresses things. And like, oh, wow, now we can finally kill these things. Like, that's incredible. And then Chaos just does it. And everyone's like, yeah, this makes sense now in this world.
Well, it's interesting that, like, especially the way that he does it, and obviously Rick described it in wonderful detail, but the fact that he touched it while it wasn't even, like, the Hilbert effect was not activated, it wasn't in the normal plane or the dimension that the humans in this game are existing in at the point in time, but he was able to either reach through or just interact with it in its own state of being in order to make it, vanish, to disappear. And I just found that really interesting, particularly interesting because of the fact of when we saw KOSMOS for the very first time activate the Hilbert effect when she's aboard the ship, I thought it was particularly noticeable. It was just literally just one single shot, but obviously you see this, this ray of light and color come out from her, but they expand back and to see like the fleet of ships, and that the effect actually happens to the entire, like, what you can only assume space-time continuum that they're existing in right now. So it's very curious to see how these two characters are interacting and kind of as polar, like framed as of what we can understand or what we can surmise right now as polar opposites of each other.
Yeah, well said, Nick. It is interesting. There are two more cutscenes we get. I'm going to blow through them a little quickly. One of them, we meet a blonde-haired youngish man named Master Wilhelm. The gist of this scene is that he is privy to Shion, Alan, and KOSMOS' current whereabouts. Somebody is reporting their information to him. And then in another cutscene, we see Commander Margulis looking at this projection along with his team of a planet just blowing up, disintegrating, and his team is protesting like, these are innocent people. We can't let this happen. And he doesn't care. He says, save your philanthropy for someone who cares. He's after the emulator at all cost. Again, this is like being talked about as if there is some serious history here, particularly with his one named subordinate, Pellegrini. But as we've said before, get those shot glasses ready. It's unclear what this means at this time.
Woohoo.
And I bet you thought we got more gameplay, but no, we got cutscenes, baby. We're even more. This is like the 45-minute stretch of cutscenes. This is where we're about to meet a new character for our party. We are on an orbiting ship, Federation Capital 5th Jerusalem. We see what looks like a sci-fi sort of Jedi Council. Like, I'm not the only one that thought that, right?
Immediately went to Episode I Jedi Council.
Yes.
I'll roll with
Chris,
it.
are you a Star Wars fan?
No.
Oh no.
I'm not a hater.
Okay,
But
okay.
like I think outside of Rogue One, I really haven't cared about it since the original, well, not the original prequel, the episode 1 through 3. That's when I like jumped off board of that. But I think Rogue One is a fantastic movie.
I love how flatly you were just like, no. Great.
Absolutely not.
Great. This makeshift Jedi Council, they're discussing a character we're about to meet, Ziggurat 8. He was a counterterrorism specialist working for, I think, the Federation when he was alive, but he is now a, quote, anachronistic cyborg. What happened was he died. We learn by his own hands. He dies by suicide and was brought back to life because of this thing called the Life Recycling Act, which was later repealed for the Species Preservation Act. The Life Recycling Act is a thing straight out of fucking dystopia. It states that like corporations can rebuild and reanimate the bodies of the dead if they need like workers and government soldiers. Absolute hellish idea. That's not explored. Like I really wish this would have been explored more, but it's kind of just flavor to the world. But anyways, that's how this character got brought back to life. They needed a government like soldier, so here he is. They comment that it seems like he seeks out missions with low outcomes of success. He wants to die. He is being tasked right now to scout out a UTIC facility. UTIC is described here as an armed group responsible for the incident 14 years ago. This has been referenced. We still don't exactly know what exactly that means. They say, this group of Jedi Council people, they tell him that there is a prototype 100 series Realian, the kind that can fight Gnosis, named Momo. Well, they don't name her, but this Realian prototype is in this UTIC facility. We learn in a scene coming up that she is encoded with a lot of data left behind by the founder of UTIC, Joachim Mizrahi, who also happens to be the ex-husband of one of the leaders on this Jedi Council, Yuli Mizrahi. She refers to her ex-husband as a murderer. This data could apparently affect the entirety of mankind, so this is why Ziggy is tasked with bringing her back, and he has only one request, and that is to have his entire brain wiped upon his return, to have his body be completely removed of organic material. He does not want to be a living being. One of the members quotes something interesting. They say, "These days Realians are clamoring for human rights, but here's a man who wants to become a machine." So we're getting so many different reflections and distortions of this idea of what does it mean to be human. We have somebody that was human that no longer wishes to be. Fascinating stuff.
It's almost like he was made to be a cyborg against his will.
And just as a quick, there's that.
Quite literally what happened.
But yeah, this is also, I just want to call out that Ziggy is also one of my favorite characters so far in the game. But he's voiced by Richard, in the English dub, he's voiced by Richard Epcar, who is also the voice actor for Commander Bato from, if you're familiar with Ghost in the Shell, he's like the main character's right-hand guy in their battalion, in their little unit that they're in. And I gotta say, he plays Ziggy to a T of this like character who is kind of just under a lot of stress, under a lot of pressure, like doesn't want to be what he is uncomfortable in his own body. And again, I'm just reiterating what we've said earlier in these episodes, that I'm just like, I'm consistently impressed by the voice acting in this game. Animes really went out of their way to just do a fantastic job in bringing these characters to life, and I'm really happy that they did.
I just want to clarify something super quick. You mentioned that like I agree. I love the voice actor's performance of Ziggy, but you mentioned that like he's not comfortable with who he is. He's got a lot of baggage. He's if I had to describe him in one word, it would be excessively pragmatic.
Yes,
like he is very collected, and like he does not get emotional, not in like a machine way, like I guess from Persona 3 or something, or KOSMOS. Like he sounds like a human, but he is just very level-headed. He's got his feet on the ground. His heads are nowhere near the clouds. He's got a job to do, and he's here to do it.
For sure. Mm-hmm.
Chris, is Ziggy your least favorite character?
No.
Oh, good.
Ziggy is actually my second or third favorite character, because Momo, we already talked about her. I think she's tied or right there with Ziggy for my second or third favorite character. So,
Oh, now I know who it is.
yeah, I already told you before in the Discord, but yeah, I really like Ziggy, and the problem with Ziggy is much like Chaos, he is not very well developed, I think. However, him as a character, as you said, is very grounded. He comes off as the voice of reason within your party. Nothing ever seems to shake him, and he always seems to have a good path forward. And like, he becomes like a really integral part of driving your party forward narratively in terms of what they need to do. And he just makes sense. And that's why I love Ziggy. I want to get more into his background because it sounds extremely interesting. But unfortunately, you don't get much into that here.
You know where you do get a lot of it? You get, well, maybe not a lot, but you get a bunch of his background in the spin-off game Xenosaga Pied Piper, which was Japan only released for mobile.
You just made that up. Stop lying to us, Rick.
I swear to God, dude. Like, I'm looking at the wiki page right now.
Okay.
Yeah, dude, Vodafone. That's the platform it was released on in Japan in 2004. As far as I know, no English ports of this exist.
One thing I do want to say here, after all these cutscenes, after getting introduced to Ziggy, this is kind of the point where I started to think that there are way too many players in this game that I'm having to keep track of.
Yes.
And that is, in a way, I started to check out from a lot of the political intrigue. And I know that wasn't the desire, but everything just becomes very, very, very hard to keep track of.
Yes. This game suffers from its scale, I think is fair to say. Like, I love this game, but it is very flawed. And Final Fantasy XIII's problem is the influx of proper nouns. This game's problem is the influx of constant rotating characters.
Yeah.
Both games demand that you do work outside of the cutscenes to understand what is going on. That would have been fascinating to bring up with John, Chris.
Yes.
One more thing just before we move on. We learned that Momo, this Realian that we're about to meet and save, is registered as the Mizrahi's daughter, even though she is a Realian. Again, going back to this blending of human and Realian characteristics, who is who and what is which. Just interesting. We don't know why Yuli Mizrahi does not want to see Momo, but she explicitly says she does not. So that's our next task. We're finally back to playing the game as Ziggy. We're on site. We've got our invisibility camo on, and it is our task to find Momo. This is like a tiny little dungeon. It's not too remarkable. You get to fight with Ziggy a little bit. There's a move, by the way. Momo's got a move called Stardust, I think.
She does.
And Ziggy Stardust,
That's awesome.
You guys heard of that? David Bowie?
I think Ziggy kind of looks like David Bowie as well.
Yeah. He kind of does. I thought that as a
not
kid
too
too,
far
man.
off.
Totally. Ziggy's a pretty good fighter too. He's tanky. He's got a ton of HP if you're across the pond.
I will say, when you're going through initially with just Ziggy through this dungeon, because you do have to go through by yourself, you almost don't want to fight any of the enemies here.
Agreed.
Oh, totally. And the game tells you not to. It's like, just sneak around, like hold R2 to walk. You won't make noise.
Yeah. You won't get your ass kicked. Like I did fight quite a bit of enemies and I was able to make it through, but I got close to being wiped several times and I definitely did not have the items to support it. So it was pretty rough.
Absolutely. You cannot do the gamer move of just fighting everything and being okay.
Yeah.
So we've got to look for her cell key, and we do find it, and we break her out. As we do that, before we do that, I should say, Momo says, I don't like being called 100 Series Realian. Ziggy's like, what do you want me to call you? And she's like, call me Momo. That's what Daddy called me. That's what Joachim Mizrahi, excuse me, not Joachim.
It's not Joachim? Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's what he used to call her, Momo, so that's what Ziggy will call her. So a dying guard that we take out sounds the alarms, and we're off. And while we're running, while we're taking cover from these agents and eggs units looking for us, Momo gives Ziggy his nickname because he introduces himself as Ziggurat 8. And she's like, that sounds too much like a machine. What about Ziggy? And this, like, for a moment, this breaks his composure because we get a flashback. It's from his point of view. It's kind of like a home movie kind of deal. And it shows him, Ziggy, getting his son a robot dog. And he's like, oh, this dog's name is, it's some kind of machine name. Like, I don't remember what it's called, like energized robotic life form or something like that. And his son almost verbatim says what Momo says. Like, that sounds too much like a machine. How about Iggy or something like that? It mirrors the exact scene perfectly. And, Ziggy doesn't open up about this just yet. But, once again, this game is setting up mysteries that are not going to get solved in this game. I can see why this would be frustrating. By the way, like, I could see why this would be frustrating to people. I really can.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you have a phone, right? Sorry.
No, you're exactly right, dude. You're exactly right. I mean, a lot of this game is not popular. Like, it's just not. There's a reason why everybody talks about Xenogears and looks over Saga. I wish they wouldn't. I still love this game, but man, is it far from perfect.
Yeah, I was just gonna say is that I just feel like there wasn't enough of a person that was in the room, and I hate to use the word adult because I feel like everybody involved in making this were 100% adults, and they're so well, they have so much knowledge and just experience in their craft. I mean, they were the premier team that left one of the best RPG companies in their time to go out and create this game. So it's like hard to kind of say, backseat develop and like say, oh, they should have done this, they should have done that. But it's just like, I really wish that there was more of an editor with a bigger presence in the room that was able to steer the ship or pare down what we needed to get all of the meat points out of these characters, while at the same time like keeping the intricacy that Saga and Takahashi put into the main act. And I feel like this is a perfect example as to like something that either didn't need to be in there at all or something that could have been just like explained away in a dialogue line.
Yeah, I agree with you. I really do.
That's not to say that I don't enjoy it at all. I am at this point, having a great time with this game.
Just to piggyback everyone's favorite line, especially in meetings.
Oh God, I'm in grad school seminar classes once again.
It reminds me of kind of like Kojima, how everyone said like, oh, Konami's holding Kojima down from his ideas. And if he just had Konami, go away, he would be a more unfocused artist, and we get to see more of the greatness that he did. And we got Death Stranding. Now, a lot of people do like Death Stranding, but that game is extremely divisive. And to a lot of people's points, it's what they said with Death Stranding was, this is what happens when there's nobody around Kojima to tell him no. And sometimes I think even as creators with Takahashi here, I think Namco brought him on with Monolith Soft and said, hey, do whatever you're going to do. We're going to give you the world. Xenogears was very critically acclaimed. We might have an RPG hit on our hands outside of Tales. We want to get into this genre, and we think you're the guy to do it. And it was kind of like it's possible that no one told Takahashi no. And so maybe too many of his ambitions were moved forward until they maybe started going out of, getting outside of budget and time and everything like that, which is why they had to curtail it down. And ultimately it did kind of hurt the series in the way that they'd had their storytelling. Like no one really to steer it and edit it and be like, hey, maybe you need to explain more here. Maybe this will hook the player a little bit more, especially if you're going to reveal more later. I do think there's a lot of that within Xenosaga 1, absolutely.
Oh, totally. If you're someone that's into what Kojima is selling or into what Takahashi is selling, then you're not going to mind the pure, raw, unfiltered product that they're sending out there because you're there for their storytelling style, their ideals, and things like that. But if you're like the general populace that's not like a super fan of them, to use a term that I don't necessarily mean, that's going to come across as like bloated or unfocused or just not ideal. By the way, I haven't played Death Stranding. I really want to. I'm waiting to put it onto the show to do it. But my favorite thing that I've heard someone say about it was Video Game Donkey. And in one video, he says something like, Death Stranding is an absolute mess of a game and I don't like it. And I would know because I've played it no less than 3 or 4 times.
That's
just perfect.
That's about right.
Yeah.
So as we're leaving, we're just about ready to wrap up for the day. As we're leaving, Margulis tries to stop us, Ziggy and Momo, that is. And by the cutscene and some of his moves, he's got a sword that he can do these wild energy attacks with. He seems like a really impressive fighter, but the fight ends really quickly.
Just as a quick note here, yeah, the fight ends quickly, but it should have ended way quicker when I went through this scene because I was streaming it and I burned through every single one of the items that I had, like the revival items or the healing potions that I had. And I was using Momo as my healer. This was what I was talking about earlier when this was the fight that kind of made me realize that there was a back row and I was getting pushed to the back row and none of my attacks were doing any effect. And I was constantly getting downed and in this loop of reviving myself and burned through completely just every single one of my resources because I thought I was supposed to kill Margulis. You can't kill Margulis. You basically just fight him until your HP is 0, and then he's an unbeatable boss.
No,
is he not?
He is beatable.
Did we talk about this?
He is beatable.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
It's not easy, obviously. But the way you beat him is you have to just grind your brains out and get like 3 or 4 or 5 levels. Like you need to get like a ton of levels while you're in that facility, which is extremely counterintuitive because that will take you like forever. But you can beat him, and you get an item for doing it.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know
what
about
item
the
do
item.
you get?
I don't remember. I didn't beat him because it was taking.
Okay, gotcha. Okay,
I didn't want to deal with it.
It's good to know that, Chris, because I just thought I was really, really pissed. I was like, "How dare they try to put me through this boss fight and not tell me it's an unwinnable boss fight?" So
yeah, you can totally win. It's kind of like, have you played Chrono Trigger?
That's on the list. It's on the list to actually play this year.
Oh, dude, it's great.
So I mean, there's a place that you can fight the final boss, and you're technically supposed to lose, but you can win, and it triggers the best ending.
Huh?
The best one?
Yes, or I think the secret one. It's either the secret one or the best one. So I mean, I don't want to say it here because I don't want to spoil Chrono Trigger, different game, but it's very similar to that. Like there are games that do reward you for beating seemingly impossible boss fights, and this is one of those instances.
Okay, fantastic.
So after this fight is over, Ziggy and Momo manage to commandeer a ship and fly off. And as that happens, we get a glimpse of a white-haired man, not Chaos, somebody that looks a little similar to Chaos, which is kind of important. Actually, it's not important at all. I just mixed up Chaos and somebody else. But we get a glimpse of this white-haired man who shows up to greet Margulis, and he is going to be an important antagonist and one of my all-time favorite antagonists. But we don't get to meet him just yet, so I won't even say his name.
Space Kefka.
I shan't. Yeah, kind of. Kefka never quoted Shakespeare. That's all I'm going to say.
No, he didn't.
He did not.
So we're going to go back to the Elsa for the time being. We get some downtime. This is our anime filler episode. This is where I remember, Nick, you had mentioned in episode 1 that you felt that there were some misogynistic things here.
Mm-hmm.
I could see this being viewed as that, especially how Captain Matthews treats Shion. Shion made everybody dinner, and he's like at the table, he will just shove his glass at her face and go, "Water." And she's like, "Oh, yes, of course." I can see it. But this is what we're doing right now. Everybody's having curry. They're like, "Oh, it's so nice to have a woman on board because, when we cook, it all tastes like shit.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody here can cook. The captain just eats everything. That's all he's good for."
Yeah.
It's downtime. Everybody's just chatting.
There's also a moment, I believe it was around the same time that Chaos is introduced, but there's a section where, if I'm not mistaken, it's not Hammer or the captain. I think the third character is his name Tommy. Tony. Yeah. Tony like walks up to Shion. He puts his arm around her and is like, I for one am glad that there's more females. I appreciate more having a female on board. Why don't after we get done with this, we just get ourselves a sweet and nice bottle of wine? And it's just like,
oh, I do remember that. Yeah,
creepy. Like, yikes. And I was just like, oh no.
He shot his shot and flamed out.
Yeah, she walked away. But it's just very casual and kind of just like accepted, and so it's just it's a little bit of a eyebrow raiser to watch it in 2024.
I do remember that. That's right. He did not handle asking her out very well. That's to be sure. Not that she would have been interested anyway, probably.
Right.
She's a work girlie.
Yeah, she's working hard.
But that's what's going on now. We get some chatting, not a ton of super useful story information, just, character building. But Cherenkov is absent from dinner. So Shion volunteers like, I'll heat up some curry and I'll go take it to him. He is observing KOSMOS downstairs. And this is where we get a flashback. This is the flashback of the massacre that happened with KOSMOS, but now we're learning more about it. What seems to have happened was that Cherenkov was directly involved in the takeover of Vector of that ship by Utic. This whole Utic crew just bursts in. Cherenkov is implied to be at the head, even though we can't see his face. And they're like, this is we are a part of Utic. You are now under our control. Any, I forget how they say it, but like any disagreement or resistance will be met with deadly force. And they've got guns out and everywhere. And that's when KOSMOS's pod opens. She wakes up, but she is like twisting unnaturally. Her head is spinning around. She's moving like a spider. And this is where she just systematically slaughters everybody. It is wild. This scene is crazy.
I thought it was great.
It was awesome.
Such a great scene.
It's almost like it's not even the KOSMOS that we know. She's not using guns or blades. She is just like snapping necks and punching really hard. It is violent. It isn't shown, by the way, how Cherenkov escaped. Like, he runs outside, she gets a good hit on him. Another ship comes by and like shines its light onto KOSMOS, and she just fucking destroys it. And it's not clear how Cherenkov escaped. He pulls a gun on KOSMOS, and he's like shaking. He intends to kill her. He puts it up to her head, but ultimately he can't. He can't stomach it. He doesn't go through with it. But before we end, there's one more thing I want to mention. This is going to be a total con to Chris, but I think it's very interesting considering what we talked about with Chaos and KOSMOS. Before Cherenkov walks into the room to, reminisce about his lovely memories with KOSMOS, Chaos is in there. And, she's sleeping. She's, powered down to be repaired. And he goes up to KOSMOS and he says, "So we finally meet."
So we finally meet. Now, where does the real you exist? Good night.
And then as he hears Cherenkov, he says goodnight to her and, hides because he doesn't want to be seen. Really, really fascinating. Because what does he mean? We were thinking before about the nature of humanity. What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be human? Now suddenly we're dealing with, what do you call it? Existence within reality, right? Where does the real you exist? I'm blanking on the name, and this is bugging the shit out of me. Consciousness? That's right, consciousness. We're dealing with that suddenly now. Now there is this idea of a separate consciousness. What does he mean by that? Where does the real you exist? We don't know, and we don't find out in this game.
Yeah, it's a shame. It really is a shame. I want to know more about Chaos. You're going to make me start playing Episode 2 before we're done recording this, Rick, just so I can get some answers. Damn you. I don't want to spoil myself either. I don't want to read because I have no idea what's going on with this dude.
Yeah, and I mean, for all listeners out there, you don't learn much more. I should say, you don't learn much more at the time of the credits rolling. This is why it's such a qualified recommendation. Like, this game is satisfying on its own. It wraps up its local story pretty okay, but you have got to be ready for the long haul if you're playing this game, and you really want to get the most out of the marrow of the bones here. You have got to be ready to go through all three, which is no small feat, both in terms of hour and prices. If you're, playing on original hardware, which is the only legal way to this day.
Again, we don't recommend you break any laws to experience this story.
I do.
However,
Yeah, I don't care. I'm not a cop. I don't care.
I am a cop and I don't care.
yeah, I do think that it is frustrating. It's like it also reminds me a lot of George Martin in terms of the way that they're presenting the story here, is where you're asking more questions than you're answering. You're creating, you're having this diaspora of characters, in your narrative that are having, a multitude of arcs that are going in seemingly endless directions, but you're hoping you have this idea in the back of your mind that yes, they are all looped together. This idea of Chaos walking up to Cosmos and asking, where is the real you? Obviously, when we saw the Zohar earlier again, and the experiments that the people that were on board the ship coming into contact with them, touching the Zohar, phasing out of reality, where is the real you? And it's a question that, maybe it is like he's asking her that, but he's also asking the audience to kind of, think about, where, who is the real Cosmos and what are we to expect from her moving forward?
Yeah, lots of questions that go unanswered. I have not read any George R.R. Martin myself, or watched the show, I should say. So, that comparison is lost on me a little bit.
That's okay.
I have watched all of Game of Thrones, and I will 100% agree with Nick on this point. I think it delivers its plot in a very similar manner.
Oh, maybe I should watch it then.
Fuck season 8.
Yeah, fuck season. Yeah, 8 and 9. Yeah, I think, is it the last one 8? Yeah,
I think the last one's 8. Yeah.
Here's the thing, and this is my co-host will always say this in terms of, he says that it's not worth watching because they don't stick the landing, and I couldn't disagree more that it's the best thing to ever happen to TV up until like halfway through season 7 and into 8. So
it falls off a cliff.
Yeah.
Best thing to happen to TV.
Yeah.
All I gotta say to that is, oh,
hey,
Tony would like a word.
Tony would like a word. Yeah, I said no pulp. This has some pulp in it.
Shum pulp.
I probably misquoted. I misquoted him on that. Shum pulp. Yeah, that's right.
Not this much. I like the kind that says shum pulp.
Oh my gosh.
Fucking great, dude. Okay, as we mentioned before, this is where we are hanging up for today. That's entirely on me. I wanted to play more for this episode. I just got really overloaded with life stuff and work.
Same.
We still have more episodes coming. We are not adding any more. I will do better to keep the pacing going through the next 2 episodes so it is a concise summary with more discussion so we're not getting too bogged down. But until next time, this is where we're ending. Chris and Nick, I got to thank you both as always again. You are 2 of the most wonderful people doing what you're doing in our podcasting circles. I'm a huge fan of both of your shows. Obviously, I give both of you money the last time I checked. Great fellas, great co-hosts too. Shout out to Shane and Will. Anything new on the pod since you've been on my show last?
Well, on my end, there is obviously I'm working on something that's going to be, as of the date that this episode comes out, it will already be released. But we just recorded our speculation on Grand Theft Auto 6 and had a lot of conversations about Rockstar's lineage, everything like where they've been, where they're going. So that's really fun.
About how they're too woke.
Yeah,
I'm kidding. I'm just kidding.
But yeah, we talked about that, and we're really interested in where that's going. But also for Rick, obviously you and other patrons or anybody who wants to consider subscribing to Patreon. Obviously, I'm not going to plug it, but we did just recently release a Patreon exclusive, timed exclusive on our platform, which is a review of Rune Factory 4 Special. Will has a lot of thoughts on that. So if you're interested in a farming romance simulator for the DS, definitely check that out.
Cool. Hey, co-signed here. Absolutely check it out. Chris, anything new on Retro Hangover other than your extreme distaste for Donkey Kong Country 2?
So our most recent episode should be about Killer Instinct, and right around the time this episode comes out, there should be a episode where we're going to be talking about Cruisin' USA, going to do a little bit of the 30-year celebration of the Ultra 64 promotion games. So we decided to pick those 2 games for the month of May. So hopefully you'll enjoy it. Also, the King of Games 96 is going to be going to the main feed starting on May 21st. So if you haven't been a patron, and I completely understand, I'm not begging you to be, but that is a project we worked really hard on with a bunch of other podcasters across, the podcasting spectrum and a couple of YouTubers as well. And that will be coming out on May 21st. And that's a tournament where we take 20 games and we determine what the best game of that year was. So we are doing 1996, and it's a fun time. Our patrons are definitely enjoying it, and I think if you're not part of that, you will definitely enjoy it too. So go check that out. I have some other Patreon goodies going on over there as well, but I don't want to plug that here. Once again, I'm not begging people to join my Patreon on your show, but enjoy the free content. Enjoy the free content. Killer Instinct, Cruising USA, and King of Games 96. And you can find us, I'm sure, in the descriptions in Rick's show notes.
This is insane. I have to check this out. Mario 64 came out in 96.
It did.
As well as Shadows of the Empire. That's okay. Sorry.
So did Resident Evil.
Oh my. Okay. All right. That's
Stacked
it.
year.
I'm subscribing. That's it.
Yeah, co-signed for Retro Hangover as well. Co-signed for both shows. Check out both of their main feeds and their Patreons. It's all there for you. If you like what they do, definitely throw them a couple bones a month if you can, and if you like, and you'll get some good stuff in return. You can find all of that in the episode show notes. You can also find our stuff in the episode show notes, where you can hang out with us on socials, join the Discord, check out the Patreon as well. The patron episode for this month is a little different. I usually try to play a licensed game, something I can clown on a little bit. But this month for May, we're doing The Last of Us Part 1. It's just going to be a first impressions if I don't finish it, but it will be on the show proper eventually. And that'll be fun. So you can check that out. Check out all of the Patreons, everybody's Patreons. Support your local artists. Good stuff.
Absolutely. Support indie podcasts specifically.
That's
Support
right.
the little guys.
Yeah, not those iHeartMedia big shots.
I mean, if you want to, go ahead, but there are smaller podcasts that would appreciate it more, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, folks, this is the end of part 2 of our Xenosaga Episode 1 mini-series. Join us next time as we go through the rest of the game and get into some of the coolest scenes this game has to offer, I think. Until then, thank you once again to Chris and to Nick. I am your host, as always, and until next time, we are signing off. Take care, everyone.